Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about liberalism, and one of its most important components, social contract theory, is a socio-political theory that has a couple of core beliefs. One is that people are inherently equal. It's very different than classical ideas that people were inherently unequal. Two, that the goal of government is to protect human or natural rights, or natural human rights, however you want to say that. Three, that the justification for governance comes from the people. We're going to look at classical liberalism's sort of most famous, at least in the English sphere, proponent, and that is John Locke, at his second treatise on civil government. To understand what a just government would look like, we need to first know what the end goal of government is. John Locke believes in order to know what a just government is, we need to know two things. We need to know essentially what humans are, and we need to know what humans formed governments initially to do. John Locke asks us to imagine something that he calls a state of nature. And the state of nature is a time before governance, before organized governance. This is where people would just theoretically be in a quote-unquote natural state. In the state of nature, John Locke obviously believes we're not governed by a government or by an organization or an association. We're sort of absolutely free. We're free to do whatever we want. Nobody's going to delimit us or tell us no. But that doesn't mean that we can actually do whatever we want, right? Instead, we're governed by the quote-unquote natural laws. And the natural laws are the things that drive and describe the universe and also ourselves. In the state of nature, they weren't free to fly, right? They were still restricted by the natural laws. So John Locke says, yeah, like they can't do things like fly or walk on water just because they're before governance. That's not the kind of freedom that we're talking about. But he also believes that the freedom that we have, that's not that kind of physical, miraculous sort of freedom, the freedom to do what we want within our natural bodies, within the natural world, is delimited by the natural laws that govern those things. There's just certain things about us that are intrinsic for John Locke. Certain things about us that don't come out because of the government, but are with us before the government. One of these things is freedom. You know, we can do what we want. We don't, without having anybody tell us what to do. Another one is our minds, our rationality. Humans are rational because they're guided by natural laws before the government comes into play. And also, he believes property. John Locke believes that we own ourselves, and that when we put work and effort into any object that we find, that makes it our property. John Locke's state of nature doesn't sound too bad. He imagines that we're all free, that we're limited by the natural laws. I couldn't accumulate hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pounds of crops and goods, and I couldn't own all of this land just on my own. I'm delimited by the natural laws. So John Locke believes this delimitation, the natural laws kind of governing us before government governs us, is relatively peaceable. People in the state of nature are still rational. They have an essential human self, and that essential human self is free. It can accumulate and create property, and it's rational. Natural human rights that John Locke believes that all people have. Well, John Locke believes that the reason that we would want to make a government, even though the state of nature is relatively peaceable, is to protect better our natural rights. The natural law delimits the amount of freedom, the amount of property, even the amount of life that you can have. But if you can come together with other rational people and give up a little bit of your freedoms, maybe you could actually extend or strengthen those freedoms, right? If you come together, you all can secure your right to freedom. You all can secure your right to property. You all together can secure your right to happiness. Coming out of the state of nature would require these rational people, these rational agents, to come together and agree on something called the social contract. And the goal of the social contract was to create a set of laws, a set of rules that all of these rational agents could agree upon that would govern them. And the goal of these laws and rules would be to enable and help their natural rights. This is his theory of how we have our human rights in the first place. How we justify and know human rights is based on this theory of the state of nature, of what it means to be a person and what people were like before governance. John Locke was one of the major philosophers who influenced the founding fathers in the creation of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. In fact, if you read the Declaration of Independence, which I posted, right after you read John Locke's treatise, you'll see that the language is stunningly similar. If we were to ask the question to John Locke, what is just, or what makes a government or society just, he would probably say two things: securing of human rights, a society that secures human rights is just, and the social contract, a society that is maintained and governed by a social contract that applies to everyone. So what do you think about John Locke's second treatise on government here? Is there an essential human self that we can determine from an imagined state of nature? Should we be working towards securing human rights? How can we know what those human rights are? And are social contracts important in order to be able to secure those human rights? All right. I look forward to hearing your comments, everybody.